We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph in Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 77a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara was discussing Rabbi Shimon's opinion in the Brayso. Rabbi Shimon says if there's an individual and there's a suffix, there's a doubt whether or not he's a confirmed mitzora, so then you bring the animal with a stipulation that if he's a mitzora, so then it's going to be an Asham mitzora, and if not, it will be Shalmei Nedava. And Rabbi Shimon said that you have to treat that carbon with all the stringencies of both Asham and Shlomim. The Gemara had used that Brayso to ask. It seems from here that Rabbi Shimon is saying even l'chatzchila mevi'in kachim lebeis hapsol, you can bring kachim to possible disqualification because you're treating this animal with all of these stringencies, and so again there might not be enough time to eat the animal, let's say, and therefore it could be disqualified because there's leftover, etc. And so the Gemara said it's no proof that Rabbi Shimon says mevi'in kachim lebeis hapsol l'chatzchila, because there it's l'tikune gavra, it's to fix the person, so to speak, because it's part of the purification process of the mitzora, so that's why it would be okay. But the Gemara asked on the previous Amud, but with regards to Rabbi Shimon, what does he do about the log shaman? Because the log shaman, that's brought in particular for the purification process of the mitzora. But what if he's not really a confirmed mitzora? And so the Gemara on the previous Amud said that if not, so what we'll say is that it's just a donation of shemen. A person is able to donate shemen in the same way you can donate a carbon mincha, and there'll be a kmitza, there'll be a fistful that goes on the mizbeach and is burned on the mizbeach. The Gemara then said, well, if there's a fistful that's burned on the mizbeach, so then when you're doing the sprinklings, because maybe this log shaman really is for the purification of the mitzora, don't you have to have a full log of shaman? And so the Gemara said, well, you can replace some of the oil after you burn on the mizbeach. You will replace some of the oil. But the Gemara then asked, if you're burning the fistful of the oil on the mizbeach, so then you're not able to do the sprinklings because that's a problem of what's called bal taktiru. And the Gemara says it's not a problem of bal taktiru because he'll just do it l'shem eitzim, meaning not for the sake. In this scenario, we're assuming that maybe he's not a mitzora. So then in that scenario that he's not a mitzora, the sprinkling is just going to be l'shem eitzim, just for, so to speak, the burning of firewood. In this case, it's not going to be for the purpose of purification. It's just going to be as though a person is sprinkling water, so to speak. And Rashi explains l'shem eitzim, for the sake of firewood, and this is really from the previous Amud. V'haydin nokat lishna de eitzim. Rashi notes the reason why we're using a language of wood over here, even though we're talking about the sprinkling of the oil. V'lo nokat l'shem mayim. It should be for the sake of water, meaning again just not for the sake of purification or for this purification process. Why does it say l'shem eitzim over here? Mishum lishna dekra. That's just because that's the language of the pasuk. De osvei mi bal taktiru, because the whole question is coming from bal taktiru, which is talking about burning. So nakat law, so that's why it says over here l'shem eitzim. And this Rashi also is from the previous Amud, l'reach nichoach iyatomal. It's only a problem if it's going to be an offering, but if it's not going to be an offering, it's not a problem. Rashi explains basrei dahu kra dechol shemimenu leishim ksiv. This is after that pasuk again, kol shemimenu leishim. It says it's written karbon reishas takrivu osam v'el hamizbeach lo yalu l'reach nichoach. And what's the explanation of that pasuk? Karbon reishas asaur udvash Kosov, Barosh HaMikra Elyon Kai. This is going on the Saor, the leaven, and the Dvash, the honey, which is mentioned at the beginning of the Pasuk, of the earlier Pasuk, V'ka'amar, and it's saying as follows, Yeshlach lahavi mehen bikurim min hadvash, ushtei halechem meha Saor, v'al hamizbeach lo yalu. You can bring as bikurim, but they shouldn't go on the Mizbeach. Akule Krakoi, it's going on the whole Pasuk, v'adrasha de Bal Taktiru. It's going on the drasha of, again, that it cannot be burned. And Rashi here is referring to what he already mentioned on the previous Amud. Again, Rashi said that the idea is that once something goes on the Mizbeach, and that can be the komets, that can be the sacrificial portions, whatever it is, so then nothing else should be burned on the Mizbeach. But the Gemara is now answering that that's not a problem over here, because if it's l'shem eitzim, if it's not for an offering, it's just to be firewood, or in this case, by the sprinkling of the oil, it's just treated as though it's not any kind of purification, it's just like the sprinkling of water, then it would be fine. But the Gemara continues and asks, V'ha'ika shirayim, but what about the remainder, devoy milinu, that again he's going to have to fill it back up again? The Gemara here is referring to the fact, as we mentioned, that when the komets is taken and burned on the Mizbeach, so then you have to take some more oil to make it a full log, and then you're going to have to sprinkle some. V'ika hachporsen, there's going to be a little bit left, the lo kametz ilave, that the komets wasn't really taken on that part, and so therefore how is that part going to be eaten? Rashi explains, Shirayim hach pursa mashahosav achar kmitza. Again, some oil was added after the fistful was taken. V'dilma nedava hava. Now maybe again this oil is a donation. V'lo shari lehu matanos ha-mitzorah, and therefore the matanos, the applications, the sprinklings of the mitzorah are not going to permit the rest of it. Ela kmitza kashari lehu, but it's the kmitza that really is doing the permitting. And the problem is, again, you have this little bit that the kmitza was taken first, so the kmitza was never taken on that part. That's what it means again, to lo kamitzi lave, that he never took the kometz on that small amount. And so the Gemara says to that, particularly on that small amount, he's able to redeem that amount. And Rashi explains, particularly that he redeems that amount. V'yomer, he says, Imeino mitzorah, if the individual is not a mitzorah, v'halug nedav, and the lug is a donation, hare masha hosafti shelo litzorech, so the part which I added, which was added for no reason, mechulal al mos halalu, that's going to be redeemed on this money. And Rashi explains why redemption is possible. The klishares ain't mekadshim ela midas, because a klishares, it's only going to be mekadesh, it will only sanctify with intention. V'zelo nosnu lesoch halug al menashik, shenu halug imeinu mitzorah, and here he's not adding it with the condition that it should be sanctified if the person is indeed not a mitzorah. Lefikach yesh lo pidyon, and that's why pidyon is possible in this situation, and so therefore again that part will be redeemed. But the Gemara continues and asks, but where exactly is it going to be when this redemption is done? Igavoy, if it's inside of the azara, so then there's a problem. Kama'ayel chulin li azara, isn't he bringing chulin into the azara? And iavroin, if it's outside the azara, so then if salei biyotze, so then it should be disqualified because it's left the proper area. And Rashi explains, Kama'ayel chulin, he's going to be bringing chulin into the azara, meaning kishu podeyu umotziu lechulin, meaning when he redeems this and he turns it into chulin, nimtza oso shemen shel chulin ba'azara, it's going to come out. They have shemen of chulin now in the azara because you're redeeming it in the azara. And if you're going to take it out, so if salei kol halug biyotze, he's taking the whole lug of oil out, so then it's disqualified because it's leaving the proper area. To hakodesh kadashim hu kamincha, because it has the status of kodesh kadashim like a mincha, and it can't leave that area. And Rashi continues, Vikash, now if you're going to ask, Lomali Kuli Hai, to Kometz Bereisha V'Hadar Mosef Aleh, why does he have to go to this extent to take the Kometz first and then add V'Ikol Akshuye Kolhani, and then we have all these questions. Rather, Liavid Bereisha Kol Tzarchim Mitzorah. Here's what he can do instead. Let him do everything that's needed for the purification of the Mitzorah first. V'Hadar Nimlayu, and then he can refill it. V'Nikmotz V'Niktar, and then he can take the Kometz, and then he can burn. V'Lo Boilam Ifrke, and then you won't need to do any redeeming. So Rashi says to that, Ikol Letrutze, we can answer as follows. Me'achar shigdisho lemizbeach ein yochel l'shanoso letzarchei mitzorah. Once he sanctifies it for the purpose of the mizbeach, he wouldn't be able to change it to be used for the mitzorah. Shema eino mitzorah, maybe he's not a mitzorah. V'halog shal mizbeach nimtza ma'aved kodshim mizbeach biyadayim. Now this log of the mizbeach, he's destroying it, so to speak, actively. Hilkach, therefore, kamitz bereisha letzarech gavo. What he actually has to do is take the kamitza first for the purpose of the Almighty, for the mizbeach. V'inami mitzorahu lo mafsid midi, and if he is a mitzorah, there's no loss to that. Because again we say, then he can just refill it as we said. And the Gemara continues and answers, Liolam Gavoy, really he will do this redemption while it's in the Azara, V'chulin memela havin, and the fact that it becomes chulin, that's something that happens automatically, so we do not consider that to be a problem. And the Gemara continues and asks, Rabbi Shimon, but isn't Rabbi Shimon the one who says, Ein misnadvin shemen, that oil cannot be donated? And again, this Bryce is according to Rabbi Shimon, so how does this solution even work according to Rabbi Shimon? And the Gemara says to that, Tikune Gav Rashani, Rabbi Shimon would say that if it's again to fix the individual, to purify the mitzorah, that would be different, and this kind of stipulation would in fact be allowed. The Gemara continues, Yosef Rav Rechume Kami de Ravina. Rav Rechume was sitting in front of Ravina, V'Yosef V'Ka'amar Mishmei de Rav Huna bar Tachlifa, and he was sitting and saying, in the name of Rav Huna bar Tachlifa, V'Neima Asham Zeh Yehi Asham Talui. Why not say that this Asham, that maybe it'll be an Asham Talui? Instead of saying that the Asham might be an Asham and might be Shalmei Nedava, say that it might be a certain Asham, or it might be an Asham Talui. An Asham Talui is generally brought in a situation of doubt. Why not say that that's a possibility? And so the Gemara says, Shma Mina. We see from here, Mantana de Poligoled Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon, who's the one that argues on Rabbi Eliezer? It's Rabbi Shimon. Diyamar ein misnadvin asham talui, who says that you're not allowed to donate an asham talui. So maybe that's the reason why asham talui is not a possibility. And the Gemara says, Amar Lei said to him, Torah, Torah, imri b'dichri mechlefi lach. Torah, Torah, you are confusing lambs with rams. And Rashi explains, V'hamar Rabbi Shimon, doesn't Rabbi Shimon say, Ein misnadvin shemen, that oil cannot be donated? L'kamon b'perakol hatadir, this is later on in perakol hatadir. V'hechi amrit Rabbi Shimon log zeh yehi nedava. So how can we say, according to Rabbi Shimon, that this log of shemen will be a nedava? And then the Gemara said, V'neimu eino mitzora asham zeh yehi asham taloi. Why don't we say that if the individual is not a mitzora, the asham can instead be an asham taloi? L'chaper al safek avera shabiyadu. An asham taloi is an atonement for any safek avera that might exist. And this would follow Rabbi Eliezer. This would follow Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Tiyamar bekrisus, because he says in krisus, misnadev adam asham taloi b'chol yom. A person is allowed to donate an asham taloi every day. Shein lach adam sheino omed b'safek. There's nobody that doesn't have some kind of doubt of a sin. This would actually be preferable, because there's one time period to eat all hashamas. So it won't be a problem of bringing kodshim to disqualification. And the Gemara ended up saying that wouldn't be a good suggestion anyhow. Torah, kolomar, what the Gemara means to say is, Heichon hi Torah shaladam gadol kamoscha, where's the Torah of such a great person like you? Because imri b'dichri kamechalfin loch, which Rashi explains means, keves ben shanaso, a year-old lamb, michlef loch ba'ayil ben shtei shanim, is getting confused with an ayil that's 2 years old. Asham mitzora keves ben shanasahu, because in Asham mitzora, that's a keves ben shanasa, that's a 1-year-old lamb. So how could he make a stipulation that if not, it's going to be an Asham talui? She'eino ba'ela ayil ben shtei shanim, that only comes from a ram that is 2 years old, so that possibility, that stipulation, is not even a possibility. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Eivare chatos shenisarvu be'eivare ola, limbs of a carbon chatos which are supposed to be eaten. Let's say they get mixed up with the limbs of a carbon ola that are supposed to be burned on the Mizbeach. Rabbi Eliezer says, Yiten lamal, you put them on the top of the Mizbeach. V'roa anias besar hachatos milmal, and I view the meat of the chatos on the Mizbeach, ki'ilu hein eitzim, as if it's wood. The Chachamim say to uvar tzuras, and you let them decay, v'yatzu lebeis hasreif, and then they go out to the beis hasreifa, to the area where they are burned. Rashi explains, Yiten lamala al ha-mizbeach. Yiten lamala means you place them on the mizbeach. V'roa anias besar chatas shu bebal taktiru. Again, the besar chatas is really under the prohibition of bal taktiru, which was mentioned above. But we say no, ki'ilu ein eitzim, it's just like burning wood. Tekeven delo lahaktarim mechavin shari, as we said above, as long as he doesn't have in mind, he doesn't have intention for burning it for the sake of an offering, it is permitted. And Rashi continues, V'yatzu lebeis hasreifa, according to the Chachamim, they go out to the beis hasreifa, less low rowan, because the Chachamim don't hold of rowan. They don't hold you can burn it on the Mizbeach as if it's eitzim. V'ko'avar, so therefore you do have a problem of a transgression. B'chol shemimenu li'ishim hu beval taktiru, of anything that went on the fire already, so the remainder is bal taktiru. You can't burn that on the Mizbeach. Shekvari murav karvu, because in this case, the sacrificial portions were already offered. V'nasa habasar shirayim, so the meat becomes remainder, and it cannot go on the Mizbeach according to the Chachamim. That's why it has to go to the Beis HaSreifa. And the Gemara says, my time with Rabbi Eliezer, what's the reason of Rabbi Eliezer? Why does Rabbi Eliezer say that one is allowed to take these limbs and burn them on the Mizbeach as if they are firewood? Amar Krotz, because the Pasuk says, Ve'ela Mizbeach lo yalu l'reach nichoach. It says it can't go on the Mizbeach l'reach nichoach, for a pleasant aroma. And we darshan l'reach nichoach yatamala. It can't be for a reach nichoach, meaning it can't be offered. Avol atamala l'shem eitzim, but you can put it on the Mizbeach as if it's firewood. That's why Rabbi Eliezer has this leniency. For Rabbanan, but the Rabbanan respond, Mi'et Rachmana, that there's an exclusion in the Pasuk. Osam, it says in the Pasuk, Osam, which means them. Osam hu di'a tamala, avol tamala l'shem eitzim. Those things identified in the Pasuk, that we have the leniency, where you can't offer it as an offering, but you can do it as firewood. Avol midi achrina lo, but for other items, this leniency does not apply according to the Chachamim. Rashi explains, Ve'el ha-mizbeach lo yalu basar lo saktiru mimenu darshinan minei kol shemimenu leishim ksiv. Again, after it says lo saktiru, we make this drasha of kol shemimenu leishim. Once something goes on the fire, once a part of it is offered as an offering on the mizbeach, so the rest is bal taktiru. And then again, the Chachamim respond, Osam bereisha dekra ksiv. This is in the beginning of the pasuk. It's written korban reishis takrivu osam. It says you're going to bring them. V'yasaoru dvash kol. This is going specifically on leaven and honey, as I explained earlier. What it means is, what are you bringing? So from Seor, we bring the Shtei HaLechem, that's the first of the Menachos. Ubikurim min hadvash, and Bikurim is brought from the Dvash. V'al hamizbeach lo yalu, and so it says over there that they don't go on the Mizbeach. Avol atamal l'shem eitzim, but you are allowed to put them on the Mizbeach as firewood. Avol midi achrina lo, but anything else, we don't have that leniency. Akol shemimenu li'ishim denofik misefid dekra kama lo kai. It's not going on anything else. Again, when we talk about kol shemimenu li'ishim, and we have this leniency of l'shem eitzim, it doesn't apply to anything else. And we will take a look at the full pasuk. The full pasuk says, "Kol hamincha asher takrivu laHashem lo seyasa chametz." The mincha can't be chametz ki chol seor v'chol dvash lo saktiru mimenu isha laHashem, because seor and dvash cannot be burned as an offering to Hashem. Korban reishis takrivu osam laHashem ve'el hamizbeach lo yalu l'reach nichoach. Again, they can be korban reishis, which Rashi already mentioned refers to the Shtei HaLechem, refers to Bikurim, but they don't go on the mizbeach. And again, according to the Chachamim, we darshan just when it comes to Seor and Davash, they don't go on the Mizbeach l'reach nichoach, but they can go l'shem eitzim. And again, according to Rabbi Eliezer, anything can be l'shem eitzim. Even the other parts of the remainders of a carbon, those are allowed. We do have the leniency of l'shem eitzim. And the Gemara continues with Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Eliezer, what does he do with the word osam? Osam hu d'raboy loch kevesh k'mizbeach. By them, meaning by the Seor and the Davash, there we include the ramp, that it has the same status as the Mizbeach. The same prohibition that applies, that you can't offer them on the Mizbeach, also applies to bringing them on the ramp of the Mizbeach. Avol midi achrini lo, but other things, meaning besides Seor and Dvash, let's say the remainder from a carbon, so over there the prohibition is only on the Mizbeach, it does not apply to the ramp. The Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan, they respond to Rabbi Eliezer, Tarti, Shma Mina, that we actually learn both. We learn both our halacha from Osam, and we learn this halacha as well in terms of the Kavesh from Osam. And Rashi explains, Rabbi Eliezer says, Lohachi ksiv osam, the reason why it says osam, Lemuute asoru dvash, Lemuute shirayim, me'azar es elam mizbeach lo yalu. We're going to exclude the shirayim, the remainder from a carbon. That doesn't apply when it says elam mizbeach lo yalu, demarbinon minei kevesh k'mizbeach, where in general we say the ramp is the same as the mizbeach. That's only by the sor and the dvash. That's not true by shirayim. Kidatanya b'Toras Kohanim, like we learned in the Bryce in Toras Kohanim, ainly elam Mizbeach, Kevesh Minayin, this prohibition, I only know it applies to the Mizbeach. How do I know the ramp? Talmud Lomer El HaMizbeach. It says El HaMizbeach, and so that includes the ramp. And again, the idea is that includes the ramp only by Seor and Dvash, and not by Shirayim. V'Rabbanan Tarti Shaminan Mina, and the Rabbanan, they are able to learn both from the word Osam, to Miyuta do Osam, because that exclusion of Osam, Akol Mai Dechsib Hadekra Koi, it's going on everything in the Pasuk. V'Chihechi Demayit Shirayim Misura, to Ribuya, the Kevesh K'Mizbeach, just like we exclude Shirayim from the prohibition of the inclusion of the ramp like the Mizbeach, we also exclude them from that leniency, from that heter, to halal l'shem eitzim, that you're allowed to bring it up if it's l'shem eitzim as firewood. We exclude from that as well the nafka mehaikra, which is learned from this pasuk. And the Gemara continues, Masnisan deloki aitana detanya, our Mishnah is not like the Tana of the following Brisa. We learned in the Brisa, Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Lo nechleku Rabbi Eliezer v'chachamim. Rabbi Eliezer and the Chacham, they do not argue. Ale vore chatos shenesarvu be'vore ola. If you have limbs of a chatos that get mixed up with limbs of an ola, sheyikravu, that those should be offered. There's no machlokas over there. And beroveya v'nirba, let's say you have the limbs get mixed up with an animal that's a roveya or a nirva involved in bestiality. So there shalo yikravu, there they certainly should not be offered. Alman nechleku, what do they argue about? What is the machlokas Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim? It's in the following case. Alevare ola tamima. Let's say you have the limbs of an ola that was an unblemished ola. Shenisarvu beivare balas mum, and they get mixed up with the limbs of an ola which is a balas mum, which has a blemish. That's where we have a machlokas. Rabbi Eliezer omer yikravu v'roani lamala kilo heinetzim. There again, Rabbi Eliezer says they can all be offered. They are on the mizbeach, and we view them as if they're just firewood, and therefore you're allowed to offer even that which is blemished. The Chachamim omer, and the Chachamim say lo lo yikravu, they cannot be offered. And the Gemara says, Rabbi Eliezer, now according to Rabbi Eliezer, Ma'ishna Rovea v'nirba delo chazu, what's the difference by Rovea and Nirva? We say that's not fit for the Mizbeach. Ba'alas mumnami lo chazi, when it comes to a blemish also, an animal with a blemish is also not fit for the Mizbeach, so why make that distinction? And Rashi explains, Masnisan de katani de bibsar chatos pligi rabbanon, our Mishnah which says that by the meat of a chatos, the rabbanon argue. V'katani nami, it also says, Evarim bebalei mumin, let's say you have limbs that get mixed up with the limbs of animals that are balei mumin, that have blemishes, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Zayin Amid Beis.